collapse of a very ancient structure, and this is going to change history in ways we cannot even begin to fathom. That's the big picture I keep looking at. And so even though it's frustrating to still see people like Justin Castro and Emmanuel Macron and Joe Fake Biden on the TV sets, we know they are doomed. The biggest interesting event in the past week for me was the delay of Justin Castro's plane from leaving India. He was there with his people for the G20 summit, and for some reason he was excluded from two of the main events. And then, most interesting of all, Indian drug-sniffing dogs detected large amounts of illegal drugs on Trudeau's plane, and they prevented him from leaving. This was spun in the official news as a mechanical problem. Later, I found out again from, these are CIA sources, so you got to take them with a bit of grain of salt, but I think this time they're speaking the truth. The person who keeps this Cast Trudeau show going is Jagmeet Singh, the Sikh origin politician in Canada, and apparently he is wanted as a terrorist in India. And so the Indian government is saying that they want Singh and Trudeau to resign before they will resume relations with Canada. In any case, detaining a prime minister like that for 2 days, that's a sign something big is happening. Now, the other really big event that is happening, of course, is Kim Jong-un of North Korea visiting Russia, and now Vladimir Putin, the Russian presidential avatar, is going to visit North Korea. This is a sign, again, as I was told before by Asian secret societies, something is going to happen in Asia. It's interesting to notice that all the Japanese media refuse to mention that North Korea now has a submarine with 10 intercontinental ballistic nuclear missiles on board. Normally, they freak out and they put big headlines and massive alerts every time they fire a little firecracker into the ocean, you know, and now they're completely shut up. That's because this is real. And the North Koreans, I have been in touch with them. They say they are going to disperse their population into the countryside and underground, and they're going to force a showdown over Japan and the Korean Peninsula this autumn. And I think that the situation is ripe for some anomaly here. Now, the Japanese military intelligence, they called me up, and I think they're still spinning for the Rockefellers and those people, but what they told me was that Prime Minister Kishida of Japan was going to resign, and that Obuchi Yuko, the daughter of the murdered former Prime Minister Obuchi, was going to become Prime Minister. And this would happen at the same time as Kamala Harris. So in other words, the people who have been using the Biden avatar are now freaking out, and they're hoping that if they put some woman on the cover, they can soften their image and avoid some sort of Trump or Kennedy-related apocalypse against their power base. But that's not going to happen. It's really endgame. I don't know how it will play, but I do see that people like Tedros of the WHO and Klaus Schwab, they're all admitting in public now that something is not working. They are scared. Every day now, more and more fact-based information about the damage caused by vaccines is coming out. The fact that the pandemic was created by bioweapons is coming out. And there's no escaping this. These people have attempted the largest mass murder in history, and they're not going to get away with it. Now, of course, the big event we're all looking for, again, is September 30th. Will they finally pull the plug on this whole horror show? They have the fiscal year end then. As usual, they haven't yet figured out how they're going to pay for it, and they will be given until mid-October, but I don't think this time they're going to make it. I certainly wish to lobby as hard as I can for the collapse of the system. Don't accept the Kamala Harris, as a new face for these criminals. It's not going to change anything. It's got to be, the whole thing's got to be unplugged, if you ask me. And I think a lot of people agree with that. The U.S. military, of course, has now been proven to be a complete incompetent, money-wasting fraud, and it's going to be people like Colonel Douglas Macgregor who need to lead a revolution by the colonels. Okay, the generals are not going to do it. The colonels need to take action, and they know by now, anybody who's still using their own brain, who's actually thinking and checking real facts in the real world, will know that the U.S. government has been hijacked by criminals who are incompetent. They can be criminals, and people will overlook it if the real economy is doing okay, but it's not. Right now, the United States is headed for anarchy, and for example, retail theft at Target is up 120%. That's criminal. The safety across the United States is collapsing. Internationally, the United States is isolated. They can't pay for anything. They're running out of oil. The whole thing is headed for collapse. And so far, although there is a strong and powerful faction among the white hats that's ready for a smooth transition, it's not looking like that's going to happen yet. It looks like we're going to see some sort of collapse and anarchy in the United States and large parts of Europe as early as this autumn, because they're not going to have the oil to get through winter. They're not going to have money to pay for groceries, and their big bet, bet on electric cars as the future of the economy that was going to, change everything, is blowing up big time. As I mentioned as I posted in my newsletter this week, a electric car, sort of an entry-level cheap one, after 70,000 miles, it received an invoice of $30,000 to replace the battery. So this whole technology is wrong. It's a symbol of a collapsing system. Now, the other big thing, of course, is Apple. Apple, I used to think of as white hats, but something has happened there. For example, a lot of the encrypted mail will no longer use Apple because they have a back door. Now, China is getting ready to ban Apple, and that's 20% of their sales. Now, France has come out and said that their phones are radioactive. This is some sort of attack against them. But the other thing is that the one card the United States people thought they had was control over semiconductors has been destroyed because Huawei has revealed that they have, almost state-of-the-art technology despite U.S. boycotts. So the whole house of cards is collapsing, and we need to make sure it continues. Now, the other thing I'm keeping an eye on is China, because I think something is happening there too. It may even be that Xi Jinping will be removed. That's a big thing to say, but there's some evidence for this. The biggest one, of course, is that the Chinese are starting to figure out who was responsible for the incredible PCR lockdown, the social credit scores. All that stuff is not Chinese policy. That was dictated to them by Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum. And if the Chinese figure out that Xi Jinping was an agent for these people, then he's toast. We'll see. But he has vanished again from public view, and China has its own problems. China copied the post-war model that Japan used, which was to use the real estate market as a basis for the financial system. And that led to decades of double-digit growth in Japan, and it led to decades of double-digit growth in China. But it has its limit. that limit has been reached in China. So, for example, it would take 44 years of a working person's wages to buy an apartment in places like Shanghai. That's impossible. And in meanwhile, the super rich have been buying apartments and leaving them empty because if they rent them out, they become secondhand, they lose value. So more than 20% of the apartments are empty, even as people can't afford, people actually need one, can't afford them. So this is not a problem that can be solved by tweaking the current system. It means that they have to do something much more radical. The obvious thing would be to, for example, put a huge tax on empty apartments and force people to rent them, things like that. But in any case, the system there is dysfunctional too. The Chinese, though, have a much more competent government, and they will leadership is dealt with. But the United States is not going to survive in its current form. I keep hearing about some sort of October surprise. Every year we do have one, I know, but it looks like this year is going to be bigger than average. But we need to make sure it's done by the white hats. So, for example, when the Japanese military intelligence called me and they say, "Hey, something's going to happen. The U.S. government has sent a notice to all the media companies." I thought, "Oh, great," and then you look at what the notice was, and it was, "Don't report about Hunter Biden. It's not true." Well, it is true. We have people like the former chief prosecutor of the Ukraine saying so in public. So basically, the criminals who've hijacked the governments in the West are circling the wagons, but we must bring these people to justice. We must end this. And again, I repeat, I ask the Swiss people to go in and arrest the people at the World Economic Forum, arrest Klaus Schwab, close down those fake UN organizations, remove the filth from Lake Geneva before we're forced to drop a nuclear bomb there. You got that, Switzerland? In any case, please keep the fight on, but what we're watching now is an inevitable, mathematically certain collapse of the current leadership of the G7 and to a lesser extent the G20. And this will mean the end of the UN, the BIS, the World Bank, the IMF, everything. But if we don't do it right, there's going to be chaos and bloodshed. If we do it right, a golden age is going to start. And I'm sure that the majority of the world is on board for that. So we're kind of like in the interim before the collapse. That's my view of the situation, having come back from my holidays in Canada and talked to a lot of people. It really does look like something is going to happen this autumn. Okay, well, that's what I have to say for myself today. Now I'd like to answer questions from readers and viewers.
Hey, Ben, we have a question today. Some people express doubts about the effectiveness of the BRICS being able to really make an impact, but then there are others that say the USA is actually already part of BRICS, but it has not been announced yet. What is your take on this?
Leaving the political leadership aside, the fact is that this new group controls 47% of the world's population, 38% of GDP, and most of the world's oil reserves. So, this is a sea change. In other words, what's happened is that the balance of the world economy and power has shifted to Asia. And what the political structures haven't followed suit, but it's a structural thing. It's not something that a single leader can change. And no, the United States is not part of the BRICS. They ask to be, but the current leadership is genocidal, and they've been spreading bioweapons. They've been starting wars, and no, they're not going to be allowed to join the BRICS. But the BRICS itself isn't the real answer. The real answer is going to be some kind of compromise between East and West, and maybe India will be the country that helps mediate this. We'll see. Next question.
Hi, Ben. What do you know about Gesera Nasgera? You mentioned people could take their money out of the bank and buy things. We had been told in the USA our money would be mirrored in the AVA system. Is this true? A friend in India said they were told India was going digital and they should take their money out of the banks. Is this also true?
There are okay, first of all, Nisara Gesara, as I keep repeating, I did research on this years ago. It was a good idea that has never been passed into law, and it's been taken over to a large extent by con artists who are selling people Zimbabwe dollars and Vietnamese dong and Iraqi dinars and stuff. This is a whole bush con job, so don't believe it. But we are going to have some sort of jubilee, some sort of debt write-off, and uh, it's going to mean everyone's going to lose all their debt and they're going to end up owning the house they live in. But all these Nasara Gasara things where people, buy these programs or get conned, that's not going to happen. Now, India is trying to push for digital currency to better control their population. Other places are going to do it. But the fact of the matter is, it's impossible to make the whole economy reliant on digital currency because digital is just a reflection of reality. Anything that really exists is going to always be on top. This will never go away. They can try, but they can't because they can't make reality go away. So don't worry about the digital currencies. Next question.
Ben, thank you for the humanitarian work that you do and the risks you take in making the world a better place. About 2 weeks ago, my friends were vacationing in Europe and spotted an evergreen container ship in the Greek waters. Given the nefarious role that this corporation had in the trafficking of children and the subtle understanding of how the alliance operates in crushing down on crimes against humanity, can we assume that the criminal heads of Evergreen and similar corporations have been removed and the assets of these corporations are now under new ownership?
No, not yet. We cannot assume that. The Fortune 500 are still under the control of the criminals. They have not lost control of the corporations, and that's why the battle needs to continue, and it needs to be taken to Switzerland, where the owners of these corporations are hiding. As for the evergreen ships, well, I mean they're everywhere. So not everyone is going to be full of trafficked children and stuff, but we hope the white hats will be monitoring this because yes, they're still trafficking children, and yes, they're still spreading toxic diseases, and yes, they're still trying to start World War III. It's not over until it's over, and we all need to keep fighting. But I'll look more into the evergreen thing in Greece and see if there's more to it. Next question.
Hi, Ben. Right now, I'd like to ask for evidence that Operation Warp Speed was using the same mRNA vaccine as Fauci and the cabal were using. Maybe they were the same, but I haven't seen any evidence that Warp Speed was the same mRNA. What are your take on this?
All I know is that there is masses and masses of evidence that the vaccines were not safety tested, that the adverse effects are very widespread. Now, the warp speed business about how Trump was just trying to, uh, you know, short circuit the process and using 5D chess. Well, let's see. But uh, personally, I don't think he should have gone for any vaccines whatsoever. And the fact that he had to shows that he did not have real power. So uh, if Trump is really the commander in chief of the military, then why doesn't he send special forces into the headquarters of Pfizer and Google and all those places and deal with these people? If he can't do it, then he should come out and say so and get the real military to actually do something about it. But the vaccine stuff is so thoroughly documented now that it can't be papered over, and Trump needs to come clean about this. He started by saying we need to study the side effects. He's beginning, but he needs to come out with a full confession. Next question.
We have our last question for today. What do you know about Russell J. Gold and what do you think of him?
Let me get back to you on that. I don't have a good answer right now. I need to look further into this one. So, like I say, I'm in talks with the North Koreans and the Asian underworld, and they do expect some big event in East Asia. That's the big thing I'm looking at. But if we play our cards right, the United States will also be liberated as early as October. Let's all keep fighting until it happens. I hope to see you again next week.